Gunpowder is the first physical explosive. Before its invention, many incendiary and burning devices had been used, including Greek fire. The invention of gunpowder is attributed to experimentation in Chinese alchemy by Taoists in the pursuit of immortality, and is popularly listed as one of the 4 great inventions of China. It was invented during the late Tang Dynasty, 9th century, but the earliest record of a written formula appeared in the Song Dynasty, 11th century. Knowledge of gunpowder spread rapidly throughout the Old World, possibly as a result of the Mongol conquests during the 13th century, with written formula for it appearing in the 1267 Opus Majus treatise by Roger Bacon and a 1280 treatise by Hassan al-Rama. It was employed in warfare to some effect from at least the 12th century in weapons such as fire arrows, bombs, and the fire lance before the appearance of the gun. While the fire lance was eventually supplanted by the gun, other gunpowder weapons such as rockets and fire arrows continued to see use in China, Korea, India, and eventually Europe. Bombs too never ceased to develop and continued to progress into the modern day as grenades, mines, and other explosive implements. Gunpowder has also been used for non-military purposes such as fireworks for entertainment, or in explosives for mining and tunneling. The evolution of guns led to the development of artillery during the 15th century, pioneered by states such as the Duchy of Burgundy. Firearms came to dominate early modern warfare in Europe by the 17th century. The gradual improvement of cannons firing heavier rounds for a greater impact against fortifications led to the invention of the star fort and the bastion in the Western world, where traditional city walls and castles were no longer suitable for defense. The use of gunpowder technology also spread throughout the Islamic world and to India, Korea, and Japan. The so-called Gunpowder Empires of the early modern period consisted of the Mughal Empire, Safavid Empire, and Ottoman Empire. The use of gunpowder in warfare during the course of the 19th century diminished due to the invention of smokeless powder. Gunpowder is often referred to today as black powder to distinguish it from the propellant used in contemporary firearms. Chinese beginnings. Although it is not known precisely by whom gunpowder was invented, most historians agree that gunpowder's origins were in China due to the amount of archaeological evidence and historical documents that exist predating others by centuries. The very earliest possible reference to gunpowder appeared in 142 AD during the Eastern Han Dynasty, when the alchemist Wei Boyang wrote about a substance with the properties of gunpowder. He described a mixture of 3 powders that would fly and dance violently in his Cantung Chi, otherwise known as the Book of the Kinship of Three, a Taoist text on the subject of alchemy. Although it is impossible to know if he was actually referring to gunpowder, no other explosive known to scientists is composed of 3 powders. While it was almost certainly not their intention to create a weapon of war, Taoist alchemists continued to play a major role of gunpowder development due to their experiments on sulfur and saltpeter in the search for eternal life and ways to transmute one material into another. Historian Peter Lorge notes that despite the early association of gunpowder with Taoism, this may be a quirk of historiography, and a result of the better preservation of texts associated with Taoism rather than being a subject limited to only Taoists. The Taoist quest for the elixir of life attracted many powerful patrons, one of whom was Emperor Wu of Han. One of the resulting alchemical experiments involved heating 10% sulfur and 75% saltpeter to transform them. The next reference to gunpowder occurred in the year 300 during the Jin dynasty, 265–420. A Taoist philosopher by the name of Ji Hong wrote down the ingredients of gunpowder in his surviving works, collectively known as the Baopuzi, the master who embraces simplicity. The inner chapters on Taoism contains records of his experiments with heated saltpeter, pine resin, and charcoal among other carbon materials, resulting in explosion, which most historians acknowledge as an early form of gunpowder. In 492, Taoist alchemists noted that saltpeter, one of the most important ingredients in gunpowder, burns with a purple flame, allowing for practical efforts at purifying the substance. The first confirmed reference to what can be considered gunpowder in China occurred more than 300 years later during the Tang Dynasty, first in a formula contained in the Taizhang Shenzhijindan Miju, in 808, and then about 50 years later in a Taoist text known as the Zhenyuan Miodeo Yaolyu. The first formula was a combination of 6 parts sulfur to 6 parts saltpeter to 1 part birthwort herb. The Taoist text warned against an assortment of dangerous formulas, one of which corresponds with gunpowder. Some have heated together sulfur, realgar, arsenic disulfide, and saltpeter with honey, smoke result, so that their hands and faces have been burnt, and even the whole house burned down. Alchemists called this discovery fire medicine, huoyao, and the term has continued to refer to gunpowder in China into the present day, a reminder of its heritage as a side result in the search for longevity-increasing drugs. The earliest surviving chemical formula of gunpowder dates to 1044 in the form of the military manual Wujing Zanjiao, also known in English as the Complete Essentials for the Military Classics, which contains a collection of factoids on Chinese weaponry. The Wujing Zanjiao served as a repository of antiquated or fanciful weaponry, and this applied to gunpowder as well, suggesting that it had already been weaponized long before the invention of what would today be considered conventional firearms. These types of gunpowder weapon styles an assortment of odd names such as Flying Incendiary Club for subjugating demons, Caltrop Fireball, 10,000 Fire Flying Sand Magic Bomb, Big Bee's Nest, Burning Heaven Fierce Fire Unstoppable Bomb, Fire Bricks which released Flying Swallows, Flying Rats, Fire Birds, and Fire Oxen. Eventually they gave way and coalesced into a smaller number of dominant weapon types, notably gunpowder arrows, bombs, and guns. This was most likely because some weapons were deemed too onerous or ineffective to deploy. Fire arrows. At this point the formula contained too little saltpeter, about 50%, to be explosive, but the mixture was highly flammable, and contemporary weapons reflected this in their deployment as mainly shock and incendiary weapons. One of the first, if not the first of these weapons was the fire arrow. The first possible reference to the use of fire arrows was by the southern Wu in 904 during the siege of Yuzhang. An officer under Yang Xingmai by the name of Zheng Fan, ordered his troops to shoot off a machine to let fire and burn the Longsha Gate, after which he and his troops dashed over the fire into the city and captured it, and he was promoted to Prime Minister Inspectorate for his efforts and the burns his body endured. A later account of this event corroborated with the report and explained that by let fire, is meant things like fire bombs and fire arrows. Arrows carrying gunpowder was possibly the most applicable form of gunpowder weaponry at the time. Early gunpowder may have only produced an effective flame when exposed to oxygen, thus the rush of air around the arrow in flight would have provided a suitable catalyst for the reaction. The first fire arrows were arrows strapped with gunpowder incendiaries, but in 969 two Song generals, Yu Yufang and Feng Jishan, invented a variant fire arrow which utilizing gunpowder tubes as propellant. Afterwards fire arrows started transitioning to rocket-propelled weapons rather than being fired from a bow. These fire arrows were shown to the emperor in 970 when the head of a weapons manufacturing bureau sent Feng Jishan to demonstrate the gunpowder arrow design, for which he was heavily rewarded. In 1000 a soldier by the name of Tang Fu, also demonstrated his own designs of gunpowder arrows, gunpowder pots, a proto-bomb which spews fire, and gunpowder caltrops, for which he was richly rewarded as well. The imperial court took great interest in the progress of gunpowder developments and actively encouraged as well as disseminated military technology. For example, in 1002 a local militia man named Shi Pu showed his own versions of fireballs and gunpowder arrows to imperial officials. They were so astounded that the emperor and court decreed that a team would be assembled to print the plans and instructions for the new designs to promulgate throughout the realm. The Song court's policy of rewarding military innovators was reported to have brought about a great number of cases of people presenting technology and techniques, according to the official history of Song. Production of gunpowder and fire arrows heavily increased in the 11th century as the court centralized the production process, constructing large gunpowder production facilities, hiring artisans, carpenters, and tanners for the military production complex in the capital of Kaifeng. One surviving source circa 1023 lists all the artisans working in Kaifeng, while another notes that in 1083 the imperial court sent 100,000 gunpowder arrows to one garrison and 250,000 to another. Evidence of gunpowder in the Liao dynasty and Western Xia is much sparser than in Song, but some evidence such as the Song decree of 1073 that all subjects were henceforth forbidden from trading sulfur and saltpeter across the Liao border, suggests that the Liao were aware of gunpowder developments to the south and coveted gunpowder ingredients of their own. Gunpowder Age. Jin-Song Wars. The Jurchen people of Manchuria united under Wanyan Aguda and established the Jin dynasty in 1115. Allying with the Song, they rose rapidly to the forefront of East Asian powers and defeated the Liao dynasty in a shockingly short span of time, destroying the 150-year balance of power between the Song, Liao, and Western Xia. Remnants of the Liao fled to the west and became known as the Karakitai, or Western Liao to the Chinese. In the east, the fragile Song-Jin alliance dissolved once the Jin saw how badly the Song army had performed against Liao forces. Realizing the weakness of Song, the Jin grew tired of waiting and captured all 5 of the Liao capitals themselves. They proceeded to make war on Song, initiating the Jin-Song Wars. For the first time, 2 major powers would have access to equally formidable gunpowder weapons. Initially the Jin expected their campaign in the south to proceed smoothly given how poorly the Song had fared against the Liao. However, they were met with stout resistance upon besieging Kaifeng in 1126 and faced the usual array of gunpowder arrows and fire bombs, but also a new weapon called the thunderclap bomb, which one witness wrote, "At night the thunderclap bombs were used, hitting the lines of the enemy well, and throwing them into great confusion. Many fled, screaming in fright." Jin troops withdrew with a ransom of Song silk and treasure but returned several months later with their own gunpowder bombs manufactured by captured Song artisans. According to historian Wang Zhaochun, the account of this battle provided the earliest truly detailed descriptions of the use of gunpowder weapons in warfare. Records show that Jin utilized gunpowder arrows and trebuchets to hurl gunpowder bombs while the Song responded with gunpowder arrows, fire bombs, thunderclap bombs, and a new addition called the molten metal bomb. As the Jin account describes, when they attacked the city's Suanhua Gate, their fire bombs fell like rain, and their arrows were so numerous as to be uncountable. The Jin captured Kaifeng despite the appearance of the molten metal bomb and secured another 20,000 fire arrows for their arsenal. The molten metal bomb appeared again in 1129 when Song General Li Yangxian clashed with Jin forces while defending a strategic pass. The Jin assault lasted day and night without respite, using siege carts, fire carts, and sky bridges, but each assault was met with Song soldiers who resisted at each occasion, and also used molten metal bombs. Wherever the gunpowder touched, everything would disintegrate without a trace. The Song relocated their capital to Hangzhou and the Jin followed. The fighting that ensued would see the first proto-gun, the fire lance, in action. Despite the low explosive potential of 11th century gunpowder, it's possible that it was already being utilized in early projectile weapons such as the fire lance. There is some minor evidence of this based on an artistic depiction of it in the form of a silk banner painting slightly predating the Wujing Zanjiao showing a demon pointing what appears to be a fire lance at the Buddha, trying to disturb his meditation. Although most Chinese scholars reject the appearance of the fire lance prior to the Jin-Song Wars, a song text from 1000 and the Wujing Zanjiao do make brief mentions of the fire lance. The fire lance, as implied by the name, is essentially a long spear or pole affixed with a tube of gunpowder, and as it saw more usage, the tube's length became longer and pellets were added to the composition. The earliest confirmed employment of the fire lance in warfare was by Song dynasty forces against the Jin in 1132 during the siege of Dun, modern Anlu, Hebei province, where they were used to great effect against wooden siege towers called sky bridges. As the sky bridges became stuck fast, more than 10 feet from the walls and unable to get any closer, were ready. From below and above the defensive structures they emerged and attacked with fire lances, striking lances, and hooked sickles, each in turn. The people at the base of the sky bridges were repulsed. Pulling their bamboo ropes, they ended up drawing the sky bridge back in an anxious and urgent rush, going about 50 paces before stopping. The surviving porters then tried once again to wheel the sky bridges into place, but Song soldiers emerged from the walls in force and made a direct attack on the sky bridge soldiers, while defenders on the walls threw bricks and shot arrows in conjunction with trebuchets hurling bombs and rocks. The sky bridges were also set fire to with incendiary bundles of grass and firewood. Li Hung, the Jin commander, decided to lift the siege, and Jin forces were driven back with severe casualties. The siege of Da'an marks an important transition and landmark in the history of gunpowder weapons, as the fire medicine of the fire lances were described using a new word, fire bomb medicine, rather than simply fire medicine. This could imply the use of a new, more potent formula, or simply an acknowledgement of the specialized military application of gunpowder. Peter Lorge suggests that this bomb powder may have been corned, making it distinct from normal gunpowder. Evidence of gunpowder firecrackers also points to their appearance at roughly around the same time fire medicine was making its transition in the literary imagination. Fire lances continued to be used as anti-personnel weapons into the Ming Dynasty, and were even attached to battle carts on one situation in 1163. Song commander Wei Sheng constructed several hundred of these carts known as At Your Desire war carts, which contained fire lances protruding from protective covering on the sides. They were used to defend mobile trebuchets that hurled fire bombs. Gunpowder technology also spread to naval warfare, and in 1129 Song decreed that all warships were to be fitted with trebuchets for hurling gunpowder bombs. Older gunpowder weapons such as fire arrows were also utilized. In 1159 a Song fleet of 120 ships caught a Jin fleet at anchor near Shizhou Island, off the shore of Shandong Peninsula. The Song commander ordered that gunpowder arrows be shot from all sides, and wherever they struck, flames and smoke rose up in swirls, setting fire to several hundred vessels. Song forces took another victory in 1161 when Song paddle boats ambushed a Jin transport fleet, launched thunderclap bombs, and drowned the Jin force in the Yangtze. According to a minor military official by the name of Zhao Wanyan, thunderclap bombs were used again to great effect by the Song during the Jin siege of Xiangyang in 1206 to 1207. Both sides had gunpowder weapons, but the Jin troops only used gunpowder arrows for destroying the city's moored vessels. The Song used fire arrows, fire bombs, and thunderclap bombs. Fire arrows and bombs were used to destroy Jin trebuchets. The thunderclap bombs were used on Jin soldiers themselves, causing foot soldiers and horsemen to panic and retreat. We beat our drums and yelled from atop the city wall, and simultaneously fired our thunderclap missiles out from the city walls. The enemy cavalry was terrified and ran away. The Jin were forced to retreat and make camp by the riverside. In a rare occurrence, the Song made a successful offensive on Jin forces and conducted a night assault using boats. They were loaded with gunpowder arrows, thunderclap bombs, 1,000 crossbowmen, 500 infantry, and 100 drummers. Jin troops were surprised in their encampment while asleep by loud drumming, followed by an onslaught of crossbow bolts, and then thunderclap bombs, which caused a panic of such magnitude that they were unable to even saddle themselves and trampled over each other trying to get away. 2,000 to 3,000 Jin troops were slaughtered along with 800 to 900 horses. Then everything changed when the Jin dynasty attacked, with even better bombs, the iron bomb. Traditionally, the inspiration for the development of the iron bomb is ascribed to the tale of a fox hunter named Iron Li. According to the story, around the year 1189 Iron Li developed a new method for hunting foxes which used a ceramic explosive to scare foxes into his nets. The explosive consisted of a ceramic bottle with a mouth, stuffed with gunpowder, and attached with a fuse. Explosive and net were placed at strategic points of places such as watering holes frequented by foxes, and when they got near enough, Iron Li would light the fuse, causing the ceramic bottle to explode and scaring the frightened foxes right into his nets. While a fanciful tale, it's not exactly certain why this would cause the development of the iron bomb, given the explosive was made using ceramics, and other materials such as bamboo or even leather would have done the same job, assuming they made a loud enough noise. Nonetheless, the iron bomb made its first appearance in 1221 at the siege of Kishu, in modern Hubei province, and this time it would be the Jin who possessed the technological advantage. The Song command Zhao Yurong survived and was able to relay his account for posterity. Kishu was a major fortress city situated near the Yangtze, and a 25,000-strong Jin army advanced on it in 1221. News of the approaching army reached Zhao Yurong in Kishu, and despite being outnumbered nearly 8-1, he decided to hold the city. Kishu's arsenal consisted of some 3,000 thunderclap bombs, 20,000 great leather bombs, and thousands of gunpowder arrows and gunpowder crossbow bolts. While the formula for gunpowder had become potent enough to consider the Song bombs to be true explosives, they were unable to match the explosive power of the Jin iron bombs. Yurong describes the uneven exchange thus: the barbaric enemy attacked the northwest tower with an unceasing flow of catapult projectiles from 13 catapults. Each catapult shot was followed by an iron fire bomb, whose sound was like thunder. That day, the city's soldiers in facing the catapult shots showed great courage as they maneuvered catapults, hindered by injuries from the iron fire bombs. Their heads, their eyes, their cheeks were exploded to bits, and only one half was left. Jin artillerists were able to successfully target the command center itself. The enemy fired off catapult stones, non-stop day and night, and the magistrate's headquarters at the eastern gate, as well as my own quarters, were hit by the most iron fire bombs, to the point that they struck even on top of sleeping quarters and nearly perished. Some said there was a traitor. If not, how would they have known the way to strike at both of these places? Zhao was able to examine the new iron bombs himself and described thus: in shape they are like gourds, but with a small mouth. They are made with pig iron, about 2 inches thick, and they cause the city's walls to shake. Houses were blown apart, towers battered, and defenders blasted from their placements. Within 4 weeks all 4 gates were under heavy bombardment. Finally the Jin made a frontal assault on the walls and scaled them, after which followed a merciless hunt for soldiers, officers, and officials of every level. Zhao managed an escape by clambering over the battlement and making a hasty retreat across the river, but his family remained in the city. Upon returning at a later date to search the ruins, he found that the bones and skeletons were so mixed up that there was no way to tell who was who. Mongol Wars. The Mongols and their rise in world history, as well as conflicts with both the Jin and Song, played a key role in the evolution of gunpowder technology. Mongol aptitude in incorporating foreign experts extended to the Chinese, who provided artisans that followed Mongol armies willingly and unwillingly far into the west and even east, to Japan. Unfortunately, textual evidence for this is scant, as the Mongols left few documents. This lack of primary source documents has caused some historians and scholars such as Kate Raffel to doubt the Mongols' role in disseminating gunpowder throughout Eurasia. On the opposite side stand historians such as Tonio Andrade and Stephen Haw, who believe that the Mongol Empire not only used gunpowder weapons but deserves the moniker the First Gunpowder Empire. Mongol conquest of the Jin Dynasty. The first concerted Mongol invasion of Jin occurred in 1211 and total conquest was not accomplished until 1234. In 1232 the Mongols besieged the Jin capital of Kaifeng and deployed gunpowder weapons along with other more conventional siege techniques such as building stockades, watchtowers, trenches, guardhouses, and forcing Chinese captives to haul supplies and fill moats. Jin scholar Lu Qi recounts in his memoir, the attack against the city walls grew increasingly intense, and bombs rained down as advanced. The Jin defenders also deployed gunpowder bombs as well as fire arrows, huojian, launched using a type of early solid propellant rocket. Of the bombs, Lu Qi writes, from within the walls the defenders responded with a gunpowder bomb called the heaven-shaking thunder bomb. Whenever the troops encountered one, several men at a time would be turned into ashes. A more fact-based and clear description of the bomb exists in the History of Jin, the heaven-shaking thunder bomb is an iron vessel filled with gunpowder. When lighted with fire and shot off, it goes off like a crash of thunder that can be heard for 100 li, burning an expanse of land more than half a mu, and the fire can even penetrate iron armor. A Ming official named He Meng Chuan would encounter an old cache of these bombs 3 centuries later in the Xi'an area. When I went on official business to Shaanxi province, I saw on top of Xi'an's city walls an old stockpile of iron bombs. They were called heaven-shaking thunder bombs, and they were like an enclosed rice bowl with a hole at the top, just big enough to put your finger in. The troops said they hadn't been used for a very long time. Furthermore, he wrote, when the powder goes off, the bomb rips open, and the iron pieces fly in all directions. That is how it is able to kill people and horses from far away. Heaven-shaking thunder bombs, also known as thunder crash bombs, were utilized prior to the siege in 1231 when a Jin general made use of them in destroying a Mongol warship, but during the siege the Mongols responded by protecting themselves with elaborate screens of thick cowhide. This was effective enough for workers to get right up to the walls to undermine their foundations and excavate protective niches. Jin defenders countered by tying iron cords and attaching them to heaven-shaking thunder bombs, which were lowered down the walls until they reached the place where the miners worked. The protective leather screens were unable to withstand the explosion, and were penetrated, killing the excavators. Another weapon the Jin employed was an improved version of the fire lance called the flying fire lance. The history of Jin provides a detailed description. To make the lance, use Chihuang paper, 16 layers of it for the tube, and make it a bit longer than 2 feet. Stuff it with willow charcoal, iron fragments, magnet ends, sulfur, white arsenic, and other ingredients, and put a fuse to the end. Each troop has hanging on him a little iron pot to keep fire, and when it's time to do battle, the flames shoot out the front of the lance more than 10 feet, and when the gunpowder is depleted, the tube isn't destroyed. While Mongol soldiers typically held a view of disdain toward most Jin weapons, apparently they greatly feared the flying fire lance and heaven-shaking thunder bomb. Kai Feng managed to hold out for a year before the Jin emperor fled and the city capitulated. In some cases Jin troops still fought with some success, scoring isolated victories such as when a Jin commander led 450 fire lancers against a Mongol encampment, which was completely routed, and 3,500 were drowned. Even after the Jin emperor committed suicide in 1234, one loyalist gathered all the metal he could find in the city he was defending, even gold and silver, and made explosives to lob against the Mongols, but the momentum of the Mongol Empire could not be stopped. By 1234, both the Western Xia and Jin dynasty had been conquered. Mongol conquest of the Song dynasty. The Mongol war machine moved south and in 1237 attacked the Song city of Anfeng, modern Shaoxian, Anhui province, using gunpowder bombs to burn the towers. These bombs were apparently quite large. Several hundred men hurled one bomb, and if it hit the tower it would immediately smash it to pieces. The Song defenders under Commander Du Gao rebuilt the towers and retaliated with their own bombs, which they called the Alipeo, after a famous local pair, probably in reference to the shape of the weapon. Perhaps as another point of military interest, the account of this battle also mentions that the Anfeng defenders were equipped with a type of small arrow to shoot through eye slits of Mongol armor, as normal arrows were too thick to penetrate. By the mid-13th century, gunpowder weapons had become central to the Song war effort. In 1257 the Song official Li Xingbo was dispatched to inspect frontier city arsenals. Li considered an ideal city arsenal to include several 100,000 iron bombshells, and also its own production facility to produce at least a couple thousand a month. The results of his tour of the border were severely disappointing, and in one arsenal he found no more than 85 iron bombshells, large and small, 95 fire arrows, and 105 fire lances. This is not sufficient for a mere 100 men, let alone 1,000, to use against an attack by the barbarians. The government supposedly wants to make preparations for the defense of its fortified cities, and to furnish them with military supplies against the enemy, yet this is all they give us. What chilling indifference! Fortunately for the song, Mongol Khan died in 1259 and the war would not continue until 1269 under the leadership of Kublai Khan, but when it did the Mongols came in full force. Blocking the Mongols' passage south of the Yangtze were the twin fortress cities of Xiangyang and Fanchanj. What resulted was one of the longest sieges the world had ever known, lasting from 1268 to 1273. For the first 3 years the Song defenders had been able to receive supplies and reinforcements by water, but in 1271 the Mongols set up a full blockade with a formidable navy of their own, isolating the two cities. This didn't prevent the Song from running the supply route anyway, and 2 men by the surname Zhang did exactly that. The 2 Zhangs commanded 100 paddle wheel boats, traveling by night under the light of lantern fire, but were discovered early on by a Mongol commander. When the Song fleet arrived near the cities, they found the Mongol fleet to have spread themselves out along the entire width of the Yangtze with vessels spread out, filling the entire surface of the river, and there was no gap for them to enter. Another defensive measure the Mongols had taken was the construction of a chain, which stretched across the water. The 2 fleets engaged in combat and the Song opened fire with fire lances, fire bombs, and crossbows. A large number of men died trying to cut through chains, pull up stakes, and hurl bombs, while Song marines fought hand-to-hand using large axes, and according to the Mongol record, on their ships they were up to the ankles in blood. With the rise of dawn, the Song vessels made it to the city walls and the citizens leapt up 100 times in joy. In 1273 tons.
Please subscribe and thanks for watching.